All right, good morning and good afternoon for some of us. Thanks for joining FSMA Friday for June 2021. My name is Aaron Bolshaw, the moderator for FSMA Fridays. For those of you maybe joining for the first time, FSMA Fridays is an ongoing monthly update for food and beverage facility operators, your QA folks, your FSQA professionals, compliance professionals, and Safety Chain teams up with the Atchison Group to bring you guidance and thought leadership on a host of topics revolving around the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. So we're covering a bit of a niche topic today, but I think it has a pretty big impact on overall food safety, which is the FDA released a report in May about foodborne illnesses in retail delis. Very fascinating study that they did, and we'll go through that. Just a quick reminder, everyone is on mute, all right? But we do want to hear from you. If you do have any questions for us, just use the console at the right of your screen there. And we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. We're going to try and wrap up in about 30 minutes today, but we do have actually some really interesting information to share, so we might go a little bit long, so hang in there. So with that, I did want to introduce our panelists today. This is Dr. Rolando González. He's a VP of Public Health at the Atchison Group and tons of experience, over 17 years in the food industry, including technical and senior roles at Target, Buehler AG, 3M Food Safety. So really some hands-on, very good approach to how to handle food systems. Degrees in microbiology and a PhD in food science and public health. Rolando, welcome.
Hello, Aaron. Very good. Happy to be here. An honor to be here with the FSMA Fridays audience again.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while since you and I have done this, so I'm happy to have you join us again. So, and Dr. Gonzalez, I read a stat. I didn't quite believe at first, but the FDA reports that there are about 48 million foodborne illnesses annually, and that contributes to 3,000 deaths and costs. They say just a little over $77 billion. And I thought it was amazing. And then I thought about it. I thought, safe to say we've all had a run-in with some sketchy foods before, and you go home with a tummy ache or maybe can't quite sleep at night after that meal out. So I think it is pretty common, and so it's important that we get through this, and this is a remarkable piece of work. So before we get into the retail side of our presentation here, just a couple of notable updates coming out of FDA and FSMA land. First one is just a big reminder to all of us, right? So a Nevada-based bottled water company agreed to stop production. They had to halt production because they failed to comply with manufacturing requirements. So that's a pretty big hit. A reminder again, keep everything in order. This was due from a GMP. They weren't following GMP, and unfortunately, some of that water was linked to a few children's liver failures. So again, kind reminder, follow the stuff. You might get shut down, and that's not good for anybody's career. Second was just, it looks like we did see the FDA's proposed budget for fiscal year 2022, which is 6.5 billion, which is I think about 6 or 7% increase over previous year. So nothing too fantastic inside of there, except just a reminder of how much it costs to run that show. Rolando, there's a couple more. Why don't you take the last 2 points for us?
Yes, absolutely, Aaron. So, at the beginning of this month, actually, on June 1st, FDA launched this traceability challenge, and it's part of their New Era Smarter Food Safety initiative, in which they're asking food safety solution providers, public health advocates, entrepreneurs, innovators, that sector of the industry to come up with traceability solutions from a technological standpoint that can be affordable, that can be used and scale up and be cost effective at the same time, regardless of the size of the operation. And that's of course in the interest of making sure that we can track product and enable rapid ID of any sources, right, or food that they have been placed in the market that are contaminated, contain some sort of hazard, and then need to be removed, of course, to prevent any further exposure of the public. So that's it's an interesting proposal, and hopefully, it's going to drive as well, which is, the intent of the agency to drive adoption of technology so that companies leverage technology more so, and it also, from a government standpoint, it can also be leveraged from a traceability standpoint. So that was one important development. And then the other one, which is not related to FSMA, but it's still, part of food safety management systems that we're going to be talking about here today. Seafood HACCP on that area. So the agency released new chapters or updated chapters and appendices to the fish and fishery products, hazards, and control guidance. This will be the 4th edition now of that guidance, and it was published just this month. So those are 2 additional important updates that we thought were good to share with the audience here.
Yeah, I like that that innovative approach. Now that challenge doesn't come with any dollars. I will note, so if anybody's on the phone with us right now about to go and look that up, there is no dollars on there, but it is still an important piece in that Modernization Act. So
correct.
So delis, we've got delis and deli meat, and so why don't you take us through the background of this, Dr. Gonzalez?
Absolutely, Aaron. So, retail food establishments, of course, they are a significant portion and sector of the food chain, of course, of the food industry. The estimates are that there are about 5 million workers in retail food stores, and sales volumes are about $800 billion. These are figures from FMI. They just published that back in 2019. Over 150,000 retail food store establishments in the U.S. So again, significant. Then, to try to relate this then to public health, as you well mentioned before, it is still a significant burden to the public health system. You mentioned 48 million illnesses, more than 28,000 hospitalizations, and about 3,000 deaths, right? And when you think about it, so 3,000 is probably, just one is one too much. And but most importantly, the most important thing here is that these are all preventable. We can prevent them. So, and in a country like the US, we should, most people would agree that we should be doing better than that. So anyway, still significant burden to the public health system. Talking specifically about the retail food stores, there is some attribution in terms of the number of outbreaks and the number of illnesses that are estimated by CDC to be caused by them. And then there is some of those anywhere from like 2 to 3%, depending on what we're talking about. So, you might think it's small, but it's still relatively significant. And then from an economic standpoint, you mentioned as well, almost $80 billion, right? That those the result from those losses related to foodborne illness that, as I said before, is preventable. So, so it is a significant topic. There is a relationship between delis and foodborne illness, and we definitely then need to take a look at this. And sorry, I went a little too fast. There is a couple of things that I wanted to bring up first so that we're on the same page in terms of these concepts. When we talk about food safety management systems, right? And it is probably what the audience is thinking we're going to discuss here. They are, in the retail food safety space, we talk about active managerial control, right? And that's what we're trying to achieve here with implementing these food safety management systems. The components of them vary across the retail and the food service industry. It is not as standardized as the FSMSs. I'm going to start using that for short, that we use in manufacturing. There's a little less standardization there, and it's okay. I mean, retail in the food service and retail space, it's slightly different than what we do for manufacturing. But typically, procedures, training, and monitoring are part of any food safety management system. There are some out there that we, that are well known. Of course, HACCP. It's probably the most well-known, but also supporting programs and prerequisites such as good manufacturing practices. And you just gave us an example of a company who had some trouble on the manufacturing side, but on retail as well. We've seen examples of that. And then there is third-party, audit criteria as well, right? From the GFSI certification programs like VRC, SQF, and so forth. So those systems and tools are available out there. Like I said before, the prevalence and the degree and the nature of the implementation of these vary significantly within the U.S. still at this, at this stage. The other thing that we need to, because these two concepts are going to be, we're using the study and we're going to talk more about them, is the concept of a certified food protection manager, right? So what is that? So this is an individual who's shown some, level of proficiency in food safety by passing a test that is part of an accredited program. And this is the type of thing that we, when we hear about ServSafe, or that's one example, or when we hear about the state level certified food protection manager certifications. So that's what we're talking about. So typically you sit for a 1 day, like 8 hours course, you take a test, and if you pass, then you can get the certification. There are requirements for continued education. So every so many years, you have to sit down for at least half a day and refresh your knowledge about that. What's important is that research has shown that the presence of one of these individuals in a food handling operation, particularly on the retail food service side, is associated with improved food safety knowledge and in inspection scores, right? So when they get inspected and they have one of these individuals on staff, particularly if they spend some significant time there, then typically they do get better scores. So key concepts. And then in this new study that we're going to be talking about today from the FDA, they investigated the relationship between those food safety management systems, the certified food protection manager, if they have one, if the operation has one, and then the occurrence of the risk factors. I'm going to see what those risk factors are in food safety behaviors and practices that are commonly associated with, leading to foodborne illness from retail food service locations. This is a 10-year study, and when I first looked at it, it was like, okay, 2015, 2016. Okay, you might think, well, it's not really updated, but what happens is this is a multi-year study, and there have been some previous ones, at least one more that we'll talk about in a second here. But this 2015, 2016 was the first period, the first data collection period of that 10-year study that is running at the moment. There will be other collection periods in which already actually happened, but the report we're not going to get until later. And then there will still be another collection period still as part of this 10-year study in 2023, 2024. So these are, and I have just included the links there. If you want to access them, they can be downloaded from there. Back in 1998 through 2008, there was another 10-year study with collection days in 1998, 2003, 2008. And in that case, they wanted to measure trends in the occurrence of foodborne disease, foodborne illness, risk factors, and the food safety behaviors practices at retail. Kind of similar, right? But every time that one of these is conducted, it helps us understand a little better what are those risk factors and what is the root cause of them, so that we can obviously address them and then prevent this from happening in the future. At that time, the study led to concluding that there was a need to conduct additional research to identify precisely the root causes associated with out of compliance risk factors, right? So companies or operations not following or not adhering to practices that lead to be in compliance with what are, adequate food safety practices, let's say. And at the same time, they determined that, the study led to understanding that there was a need to determine the most effective intervention strategies and inspection approaches for enhancing the safety of the retail food protection system. Fast forward now with this new study, then the FDA is planning to use the results of this one to develop retail food safety initiatives, policies, target intervention strategies, focusing on what? Well, those risk factors that we've been understanding over time, right? be able to provide the regulatory food safety professionals at the state, local, tribal level with the technical assistance that they need, again, from the understanding of what are these risk factors, identify what are going to be the agency work plan priorities, and obviously also understand how funds are going to be, or resources are going to be allocated to enhance retail food safety at the national level. So good aims, of course. Again, not the first time that they have done this, but it's sort of a follow-up at this point. Getting a little more specific in terms of the purpose of this particular current study. So trying to identify what are the least and the most often occurring foodborne illness risk factors, and those behaviors and practices, specifically in delis within the United States. Determine then, as well, as we said at the beginning, what is the impact and to what extent the food safety management systems and the presence of a certified food protection manager impact the occurrence of those factors and behaviors. And then also, last but not least, determine whether the occurrence of those and those risk factors and food safety behaviors depends on whether the establishment's risk characterization or categorization, and we'll see a table when that's better explained, and also determine if there is a relationship on whether they're a single unit or single, just the only operation for that particular deli, or if they are part of a chain, right? So let's say in a particular retailer, I have a well-known deli operation that has a national brand that everybody recognizes, but we know that they're not just there. Obviously, they have an infrastructure behind them that supports also with food safety program development, implementation, and so forth. And that's what they would consider that a multiple unit operation. They're not the sole one, but they are part of a chain, let's say. So they try to understand that as well. A few things about study design. We're not gonna have time to enter into all the data analysis and approaches that they use, but just a few things that we need to understand so that we then can understand the results better and the feasibility of the study as well. So these were unannounced, non-regulatory visits, so they were not gonna be given a report or a grade or anything. This was voluntary. There was a letter that was kind of an invitation to participate, and presenting also the purpose of the study, and if they did not want to participate, then it was not mandatory either. The selection was random as well, so it wasn't necessarily using any other criteria. What was the standard measurement that was used, or the criteria that was used for determining whether you're in alignment or not with food safety practices and behaviors? The 2013 edition of the FDA Food Code, right? So the model food code. They were quantitative, so it wasn't just visual observations, but there was quantitative data collected regarding food safety. Food product temperatures, sanitizer concentrations, and so forth. There were visual observations as well, but then there was also interviews to food employees and managers of the operation if there was a need for clarification on any food processes or procedures. And then the last thing, but it's also important, is that the owner or the person in charge of that retail food operation was encouraged, by the way, to accompany the data collector during the visit, so they were not prevented from being there. The coverage area was, widespread throughout the U.S. It's about 63% of all the establishments in the retail food source segment. So for a total of 42,159 establishments. And then the sample size, so how many data points pretty much were collected, then it was 397 data collections for those deli departments. And for the most part, that was a one visit. Can't remember, to be honest with you. There had to be revisits for at least one visit, of course. I talk a little bit about risk categorization. Most of the operations here fell into, actually all of them fell into the categories 2 to 4. These categories of risk have to do with the complexity of the operation. Okay, so as you see there in that table, the more complex it gets, so the higher the number. The ones in number 1, the second bullet point that I have there. So if you only serve prepackaged food, conduct just low risk food preparation activities, or just working or operating seasonally, they excluded those operations. So again, they went for a little higher risk than that, 2 to 4. I did talk about those risk factors, right, from a foodborne illness perspective, and the CDC had determined from an EPI standpoint that these 5 risk factors that are listed on the screen are the ones that contribute, to foodborne illness for the most part. So poor personal hygiene, that includes like hand washing, for example, improper food holding time and temperature, contaminated equipment protection / protection from equipment, and then inadequate cooking. This is that fifth one, which is food obtained from unsafe sources. The sources, the FDA excluded that one because they have determined that there is relatively low incidence of out of compliance or non-compliance in their previous 10-year study. So again, they refined this one to not include that last one. And then there have been inspections conducted by regulatory partners as well, and they found similar results. So we'll focus on the first 4, and that's you see the results based on that. These are the risk factors that most regulatory retail food inspections programs in the US assess based on. So, and obviously, I mean, each one of them will necessitate very, very specific food safety behaviors and practices that are, applicable to each one to be able to control the risk. A little bit of overall descriptive statistics. As I said before, risk categories 2 and 3, by the way. So 2 and 3 were the ones that I think I said 2 to 4, but yeah, mostly 2 and 3. 4 had a little bit of a share, but it was almost like 5 or 6%. The majority of the delis, about 74%, were part of a multiple unit operation. Remember, that relates to whether they're part of a chain or not. And then about 32% of the delis had well-developed and documented food safety management systems. I also said that in the US, that varies a lot. So that was important to note there. So moving on right into the key findings then, what is a good and where the opportunities are. Where we have the least opportunities for improvement is ensuring no bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods. Only 5.5% of out of compliance or non-compliance in that regards. And even so more, cooking raw animal foods to required temperatures. I think we got that. So 4.8% in terms of non-compliance is there, okay? Out of obviously the sample of delis that were studied here. So that's good. That's aided by the fact that, again, many of those have also implemented, like we said before, some of those food safety management systems, like HACCP, and cooking those raw animal foods to a required temperature. That's likely a critical control point. So that's typically even related. When we look at manufacturing, we don't see much problems with critical control points, but more so the prerequisite programs. And when we look then and where the opportunities are, that's exactly where we go then into the most critical one was ensuring that employees practice proper hand washing. 72% of out of compliance results that are out of the sample of delis. Holding foods requiring refrigerations on the cold side of things, we still have to do a better job. So about 70% of it. And then last, but also important, number 3 there, cooling foods properly. And as we know, there is different, guidelines to do so from FDA and USDA as well. So Just to point out that 66% of the delis in the study operated in jurisdictions that required a certified food protection manager, but only about 51.1% of those were actually found to have one that was also present at the time of the study. So not, not great, but about half of them. What was the strongest predictor of compliance with the different items that were evaluated here from a food safety standpoint was having good food safety management systems adopted and implemented and executed on. So to the extent that that happened, then the number of data items that were out of compliance was reduced, and therefore that has an impact then in reducing the occurrence of foodborne illness risk factors. Just one example there. So delis that had no food safety management systems in place average 4.6 data items that were out of compliance, while delis with well-developed and documented ones then average about half of that. So there is an impact in terms of having good food safety management systems in place. A little too fast there. Okay. Delis then that had, in regards to the certified food protection manager, if they had a person in charge at the time, and that person in charge was also a certified food protection manager, they also had, and this is again looking at the relationship between the two, right? Correlations here. They also had better, significantly better food safety management system scores than the delis that did not have it, or that did not employ a certified food protection manager at all. And kind of same thing. So almost about half, of the items, or the number of items that were out of compliance if you had a certified food protection manager in place, which is also then the person in charge. So the results again suggesting there, if you have a CFPM in place, you're a retail food service operation, and that person is also the person in charge and it's present at all, or let's say most hours of operation, then that enhances the effectiveness of that food safety management system, and also the the average number of items that are out of compliance. And as we said before, that has then a direct relationship to the occurrence of foodborne illness risk factors that eventually lead to foodborne illness or not, depending on whether those are present or not. One thing that we found from a TAC perspective important, and this is these other findings, is that there was reporting on grading, inspection reporting, and food handler training, and the impact of that in terms of results, right, of the study here. Grading. So as we know, on the restaurant food service side, it's become more common to adopt these grading systems. What the current study found was that the delis in jurisdictions that graded establishments did not really have significantly different results compared to those located in jurisdictions that did not grade. So that was interesting. Then in regards to inspections, those that were located in jurisdictions where there is a requirement to share publicly the inspection results also did not have any significantly different compliance results than those without the inspection reporting requirement. So that really didn't have an impact either. What did have an impact was actually training. So food handler training, and it's what we suspected, right? And we've always understood that training is critical and it's important. And in that case, yes, they did see a significantly lower number of data items that were out of compliance. So we thought from a TAC perspective that these were important findings that were not necessarily highlighted in the what the FDA summarized. What's the impact that the agency expects this study will have? Well, it will help them inform their upcoming activities on modernizing the traditional retail food safety approaches. And we mentioned briefly the new era of smarter food safety initiative that they have. So, and we even, one of the updates was this challenge, right, that they talk about with food and all of that. It does in part pertain to retail as well. But the goals that they have from a retail food service perspective is to use those food safety management systems and risk-based inspectional approaches more proactively, advance the importance of facility and equipment design as preventive controls in retail food safety. And that's interesting as well, because it is something that we work intensively with the manufacturing sector. Sometimes not as a little forgotten from a retail food service perspective, but it does have tremendous importance. Then last is the exploring of those new digital tools and even smart kitchen equipment, right? That can help with engineering out of the hands of the employees those temperature control issues that they have at times. There are areas of future study that the agency is aiming for as well. They're truly related, again, to understanding what is the impact that these risk factors can have, and how do we mitigate, right? First of all, what are the root causes of them so that we can address those, then reduce the incidence of those out of compliance incidents, and at the same time then be able to do in a cost-effective evidence-based intervention way, so implement intervention strategies and inspection approaches that can improve the retail food protection system. So again, going a little higher level again, but these are areas that the agency plans to draw from the current study and from future studies as well to better understand. So what is the summary of the outcome of this study so far, with just the first, remember, just the first baseline reading of results, is that delis are better at managing bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods and ensuring that foods are cooked to required temps and reheated properly, but they still need to gain better understanding over cooling, cold holding of foods, and then particularly those requiring refrigeration, and then employee hand washing. We learned that having those food safety management systems in place, well adopted and implemented and executed on, are the strongest predictor of compliance, right? And therefore the reduction and the mitigation of those risk factors. Having that certified food professional who is also the person in charge, present at all hours of the operation, enhances the effectiveness of those food safety management systems. And then last but not least, I mean, the FDA efforts here are aimed at aiding the decision makers in reducing the occurrence of those risk factors that are, in turn responsible for causing foodborne illness. So that was in a nutshell, Aaron, what the study revealed. There's a lot more, of course, to it, but those are the highlights. I want to see if there's any questions that we can answer here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things coming out. I have a quick question. Was there anything released yet that you know of about not just the summary of the results of the findings, but any initial guidance set? Like, hey, sometimes you see some things about enhanced training that you want to see. Like, is there any guidance that the FDA has given to these retail outlets to help? Because they're going to do the study over the next couple of years. They're going to test it twice. I'm guessing they want to get better results. Anything on the anything coming out of the FDA from that?
Yeah, no, not necessarily as a result of this particular study, Aaron, but yes, they do have resources online, and they have a whole team that is just dedicated to. It's called the Retail Food Protection Team, and there is definitely resources online that companies can look into and adopt and follow in terms of guidance, right? In terms of how to adhere to food safety practices and how to control some of these risk factors that we know are closely related to the incidence of foodborne illness coming from that sort of operation. Besides FDA, of course, there is also industry groups. There is the Food Marketing Institute and others out there who have very good resources as well for the industry to be able to benefit from.
Got it. Okay, we do have a couple of questions here, real quick, Doctor. We are being asked. I didn't see it in my review, but Giselle asks, are the studies results broken down by supermarket or grocery chain?
If I understand correctly, by identifying them.
Yeah, whether I think what and so my apologies, Giselle, if I'm not translating this properly, but I think what we wanted to see is there differences between the supermarket and grocery chains versus your boxes, right? Like your
Oh,
standard delis.
got it. Yeah, no, no, not that I have seen, and no, not that I am aware of. And I don't know if it's something that could be, obtained from the FDA upon request, but not that I recall. The remember that um, risk categorization that we talk about. That's probably the closest that we have.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and Giselle did type in that was what she was looking for, and that's actually really good. I would imagine there's some pretty there would be some different degrees there, like of those risks 1 through 4 that you'd see if you did slice that. But
Right,
so
because each one of those represents a different level of complexity of the operation. And they give you
exactly.
examples there, like number 3, for example, it's if I remember correctly, and don't quote me on that, we can look at that table again. But number 3, I believe the example number 3 will be a traditional restaurant where you go and sit down to have dinner. Um,
Yeah,
while a different number reflects something else, like similar operation in I don't know, hospital, right? Where there is still food service retail operation,
that's another
cafeteria
good
in the
point.
hospital, right?
Yeah, yep, good point.
So yeah.
Good, good. Couple more here. Mike asks, it was employee health factored in, like hepatitis. Was there anything about, I think it might have just been environmental checks and observations, right? You wouldn't be able to check on if an employee, I mean, OSHA would prevent that, right?
Yeah, no, so there wasn't specifics about employee illness other than the high level statistics of foodborne illness incidents in this country. Yeah.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So Mike also just kind of mentions, and this is what I was getting back to earlier. So he says, if employees keep hands clean, temperatures are controlled, facilities are clean, most of the issues can be mitigated. Is that it's a broad statement, but is that directionally correct?
That is directionally correct. Yes, Mike and Aaron, and I think what there are a few more things that are important, and that's why you see part of the aims of the of FDA with this new era of food safety and smarter food safety, where they mention something like equipment and facility sanitary design, right? Because some of the other things that could contribute is your ability to be able to clean and disinfect surfaces appropriately and equipment so that it doesn't become the source of cross contamination. And same also applies to behavior, right? So I can have my hands clean and I can maintain food temperature, whether it's refrigerated or if it needs to be hot, hot or cold, cold. But depending on how I behave and errors that I may make as I am handling different things, I may actually kind of lead to potential, you know, incidents of cross contamination that might lead then to um, the food getting contaminated and somebody getting sick, and obviously then just contributing to those risk factors that we talked about before.
Yep.
So yeah, that is directly correct. There's a few more things that apply, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. It obviously nothing can be boiled down so simply, but that's a good observation. I appreciate that, Mike, and thanks for
Yeah.
your response there. One last question, then we'll get on with our days. Has there been a study, so a little off topic, but still same thing? Has there been studies to any study to correlate that CFPM presence in a variety of deli establishments and the low, in parentheses, close to zero occurrence of pathogens, think Listeria M, in respective deli products? So is there any correlation that you've seen in any studies about that person, that monitoring person?
The ones that I have seen, be honest, Aaron, are related to risk factors at this level, right? In terms of those that are mostly assessed by regulatory inspectors and even the third party agencies who assess these type of operations. I haven't necessarily seen one that correlates the presence of the certified food protection manager and then the findings from an environmental microbiology standpoint. There could be one we could do a little closer search and see, but no one comes to mind at this point.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Doctor. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Appreciate everyone's time, attention. This is a cool matter that we're following, and it's all about FSMA Friday's dedication to making sure that we keep everyone up to date on the latest and greatest. There's some stuff coming up. If you want some more resources to peruse over the long summer, the nice warm, some of you may be on vacations coming up and so forth. You can always go to safetychain.com. Please, if you are not already there, get the TAG newsletter. It's chock full of great stuff, and you can always reach out to them with more specific questions and such. So next up, FSMA Friday, July, we're going to be getting Eric Edmonds back in-house, talking about some updates on the FDA food traceability rule. So look forward to that. And Dr. Gonzalez, I appreciate your time today, Dr. Gonzalez, and thanks again for joining us.
Pleasure to be here as always, Aaron.
All right, cheers. That'll end it for today. Y'all have a great weekend and have a great summer. We'll see you next time.